Cool. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We're definitely excited to talk about navigating creative goals alongside parenting, and to have this dialogue with other parents in the room that are also trying to do the same thing. It's very fresh for Emily and I because we both have young sons. Mine is 2. She's got a 3-year-old and, well, almost a 3-year-old. And
3 and 1.
And it's not easy. I think it feels very unseen in a lot of ways and undervalued. And so hopefully, as we go through this presentation, we've got questions for you guys. I hope that we get some answers back from you so that we can really lean on the collective experience that exists in this room. But we'll just jump right in.
I was going to do that, yeah.
Thank you.
If there's a way to do it in an inviting way where people don't feel like they're barging in. Because we're all parents. And we know what it's like to be barged in on. Constantly interrupted.
There's no privacy.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. What's the point?
Right. But we have these lovely little humans in our lives that make our creative practice so much better, right? Cool. Well, thank you guys so much.
Go ahead.
You do the thing though.
I should do the
This isn't it. This is the thing.
Oh.
There's the thing.
I'm gonna be the clicker.
You be the clicker. Because, I will.
Now I wish that...
We're figuring this out.
All right. I'm not saying what they're seeing. But I'm Hailey Johnson. I'm a mom to Wallace or Wally. Like I said, I've got a 2-year-old at home. And so all of this is very fresh for me. And I'm a multidisciplinary artist that's still trying to navigate what that looks like for myself. But I found some strategies with Emily, and I've become the founder of Hammerspace Gallery recently. It was actually a project that I started in Portland, Oregon as a mobile art gallery where I was doing pop-up exhibitions in public spaces to increase accessibility for arts. And unfortunately, that project died as I moved back to the Midwest, but now it's being relaunched after
You never say that very well, though.
Okay.
When she says it died,
It
she
died.
means that it didn't die financially. She literally tried to bring it from Portland to Michigan, and it broke down on the way. That's what she meant. So that was this weird death that happened, right? Where you had to deconstruct the space, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere.
Right. Yeah.
In the
There
middle
was
of nowhere.
I was traveling right in a precarious time for Montana because snowstorms were still passing through, but it was warm enough that maybe I'd get lucky and it would be okay. And unfortunately one was coming, so I couldn't just stay there and wait for someone to come help me in the middle of nowhere. It just wasn't going to happen. So it was it was kind of traumatic, but
This is probably why you don't talk about it.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
I'm sorry.
But no, it was, I think, ultimately good, right? I mean, clearly, I just took it as a sign after that point that, okay, I'm on to a new chapter, and we're going to re-envision what this looks like. And it's taken some time since then to get a new version of Hammerspace into the world. But after buying a house a few years ago, slowly started chipping away at the detached garage. I've gotten the backyard, and it's become a gallery space again. So I'm excited to share more about that at the end. But I'm also the color and design manager at Repco Light Paint, so that's my day job. So there's just a lot of things to balance, which is why we're here. I'll let Emily introduce herself.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yes.
we have to do this simultaneously. Okay. I do that one.
Teamwork.
So I'm Emily Mayo. I have a Samuel 3, Isaac 1. I'm kind of covering Isaac's body right there in that picture, but he's in the drawing. So I make drawings and sculptures, and I did study here back in the day. Danielle was one of my wonderful professors back there. Thank you for coming and supporting me. But I teach drawing at Hope College. I'm a gallery preparator over there as well, and then we're gonna do Hammerspace. We're gonna do it. It's gonna be great. I don't know what else about me. I guess I could talk about my work, but I feel like after I had kids, it was my practice kind of got reinvented, right? Because you kind of get reinvented as an individual, right? You're never the same again, so the way you relate to the world is different. So then my work definitely changed for the better. And the whole
And I think that's what we really want to focus on today is just like shedding light and talking about and naming all of the positive aspects of this, because I think it's very easy for us to just like get really entrenched in all of the less than ideal things that we have to deal with as people trying to balance these two versions of ourselves. And we'll talk about the problem in a second here, but it's because of a narrative that exists that these things aren't possible to co-create together and that they're not generative. And I think that that's a myth that we need to dispel here today, hopefully. So yeah, I like that you brought up that you've reinvented and that it does strengthen it, because I think that's really what we want to focus on today.
Yeah. And then we always forget to mention how we know each other.
Yes, we're neighbors.
We live across the street from each other.
We should say that, yeah. No, and it's taken us a while to like line up finally because of being pregnant and having kids, and then we're like, well, we're both artists. Like, it's been a minute for us to connect finally, but once we did, it was like, oh, thank goodness that you exist. And Samantha's a neighbor of ours too, and so we're so lucky to have each other so close and to have that support and community. I don't know what I would have done without it, so it's been really helpful. And that's why, we're working on Hammerspace together now to help try to really reinforce and pay that forward in a lot of ways.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So the tools that we're hoping to go through today, we're going to have to be really mindful of time because we can talk and we want you guys to talk, so it's going to be keeping an eye on the clock here. But we want to name the problem right off the bat, because I think that's something that you brought up when we were trying to plan this is, well, if we're looking for solutions coming into this room, then we really, really need to name what the problem is that we're trying to solve here. It's an important step. And then we'll reframe some of these struggles as places of inspiration, of value. We'll talk about some resources that have inspired us, that have really transformed and reignited our creative practices, and then just some simple strategies that make that inspiration actionable. Right? And then we'll talk about at the end Hammerspace, the artist cohort for parents that we're starting, and some of those resources. So
Cool. Okay, yeah, because I can be kind of a negative person to start off. So then I'm really good at like saying what's wrong with the system, right? So like the art world was not ever designed with mothers or parents in mind, right? That we are working against the flow. And there's a lot of reasons for this, right? Most all opportunities favor those that have a long exhibition record. Those exhibitions are given to those that have a longer canon of work, and those people that have a longer canon of work are those that are able to dedicate more of their time to their practice, right? And so a lot of like the art making after parenthood happens when we then reframe that problem, right, into ways that we can then create within that.
Those constraints.
I
I know for me personally, and I'm kind of jumping into the question here, how has this misconception manifested itself into your life and career? But the narrative of these things not being able to coexist well, right? If you do choose to try to do both, that you're not going to be successful. You're not going to see like traditional success in that way. That you'll be sacrificing that kept me on the fence about whether I have children. Right. I really was very unsure, and I'm so grateful that the universe made that decision for me. I have a very happy accident. But I would have only seen the limitations prior to having a child. And still, going off of this narrative for a while, that's all I really saw still. After having him was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I didn't really want to do it in some ways, right? Like, there's the battle of, do I need to do this still? Do I need to stretch myself this far? If no one's really, like, starving for my work in the world. Like, I don't have an established audience yet, and so is anyone going to miss me if I stop making, right? And I think just, we'll talk about this in a minute, but having that narrative reframed for me and seeing stories of mother artists that are successful and that see this as a generative relationship really pulled me out of that. It was like, oh no, you're going to do this still. Yeah. This is possible. And it just takes those examples. But I think those are not the ones that are shouted out into the world. There's still just a narrative that permeates the art world that you choose one or the other.
Right, yeah. And that was the same story for me, too, of why I waited a little bit longer in my mid-30s to have kids. But I had to come to face with that narrative of, like, how am I going to counter that? And we still are, right?
Right,
Every
yeah.
day we still are. And then there's these other, like, really pragmatic issues, right? The system of maternity leave and childcare, right, that are real problems.
Yeah.
That almost, if we're going to come up with a solution, we got to work as a team, right? I was, like, brainstorming with Hailey last night about, like, what does it look like if, like, a couple artist mothers come together and they're like, okay, we're going to watch our kids this night so you can go have studio time, or, like, you know, take turns, you know. And I don't know, I think that we got to, like, come together because, you know, motherhood, parenting is just so isolating, right? It can be a very isolating experience. And part of that is supposed to be kind of isolating when you have a kid. You're supposed to kind of, like, when you have a little baby, it's that very instinctive nature to do that. But then you do kind of have to open up and get help.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the solution is asking for help and being open to help. And then, another thing I was going to talk about that I think I talk about it somewhere else. I don't remember, but the fact that the art world is, like, this egocentric place that, like, you know, and then, like, motherhood and parenting is the opposite of that, right? You're living your life for somebody else. And I think there's like almost,
well, it's another way that it's going
color.
Against the grain of what's been established, that these things aren't supposed to happen together. Yeah.
But in, like, a hopeful note, I will say, like, I'm noticing a lot more opportunities around motherhood and around like parenting, and I'm noticing that narrative a little bit more. So I'm hoping that there's more track with that. But
well, I think domestic life or those practices have been elevated, you know, just outside of that, but the materials that we see entering into the contemporary art world with fibers,
textiles and fibers and stuff.
All of that is make a huge entry into the fine art space that typically was closed off from before because it was seen as a domestic or a woman's material, and so it wasn't valued in the same way as other mediums. So I do think that we are seeing these, like,
a little bit of resurgence,
little threads, as you will.
So here we go.
Reframing is one of the best tools that we have, and this is an accessible tool. It's just your mindset, right? That we're looking for alternate ways to think about our struggles and obstacles, and seeing those things. I know that they're hard, but places of inspiration and value. And we're going to try to do some of that together here. If you can bring up, okay, what's an obstacle that you feel, or what's a struggle, what's a daily annoyance that you feel as a parent that's, like, keeps you in a mental place of exhaustion in a way, right? I think so much of this is just about, like, the mental exhaustion that we feel. And it can be really energizing when you start to reframe some of these typically negative feelings you have into ones of opportunity. They become more positive. It starts that generation process. It becomes something that is a positive feedback loop now, and not one that you're trying to work against. So really just turning those struggles and obstacles into those places of inspiration has been a huge part of me coming back to my creative practice. I think it's really helped me in a lot of ways. And I can give my own example. I don't know if you want to share one too, but I would really like to hear from you guys. I'll just share mine really quick. I know an obstacle for me was time, and I think that's probably one that everyone can talk about. But having studio time, I don't know how to get enough of that. And after creating the studio space for myself in my detached garage, like, now the struggle was like, well, how do I even really utilize this? And really just seeing time as a constraint. And I think there's so many ways to reframe that. But for me personally, I started to really reframe what it means to be in the studio, and seeing my life as a parent as the same thing as working in the studio. Seeing my son as a place of inspiration. I've always been an artist that really relies on my mindset of noticing just small things throughout my day in the world, and then finding connections between those things in my studio and trying to find what is the relationship here, and how do I talk about that relationship between these things that feel very separate. And now I've become a noticer of what my son notices. And so while I don't have the mental energy to do my own separate noticing from him, I can, because my eyes are always on him, notice what he's noticing. And so he's become my filter in that way. So I really have tried to integrate him into what working in the studio is for me. So that's been a really helpful way to reframe my time, the time that I get. Now it's all the time. I'm always in the studio, right? So I think just that simple act of reframing has given me inspiration and motivation to keep moving forward.
Yeah,
And
does
I'm
anybody
curious.
else want to answer that? I know Danielle
It's a
had
struggle.
poking at you.
What kind of things do you like to create? How do you kind of transfer that inspiration into, what you like to produce or inspired by?
For me personally, it changes quite a bit. Just depends on that relationship that I end up seeing, the idea. I would consider myself a conceptual artist. And the only thing that I've really tangibly put a show together around was very recently in Hammerspace. And it was based around these sketches that I'll call sketches, I guess, but I'm a writer as well. And so my son was going through papers of mine, and normally I would not allow him to draw on my things. But my husband was there, and he was encouraging that. And it ended up being a really great place for inspiration. It was one of those moments where it was like, okay, well, actually, maybe this is interesting, and I'd like to see what he brings out of these writings. Is there a scribble that underlines something? Is there a circle that he didn't maybe very intentionally make, but I can make intentional through the ways I connect these words now? And so I created a phrase from his scribbles in my writing. Space for a string holds potential for both focus, attachment, and letting go. And so that became, okay, I'm making work around this idea now. So that was my constraint. And that was, how am I going to do that? And really, I leaned on other people in my life to help me work through those ideas. And I think that's part of this, too, is not just the artists that we have in our life and leaning on them as those places of feedback. But I was talking to my dad about, and he's not an artist, and he's not someone that I've really in the past talked much about art with. It was oh, that's interesting kind of conversation with him. And I told him what the words were, and I told him some past things that I liked that I had done. And I said, this reminds me of a belly button. This phrase reminds me of a belly button. And he's like, well, how would you print a belly button? And I was like, well, you can't. He's like, no, figure it out. How would you print a belly button? And so that became, again, another constraint to work with. Okay, I have a very physical problem to solve now. And I ended up making molds, casting into mine and my son's belly button, and then printing those on the walls in the gallery was a big part of the piece. And then collecting my husband's belly button lint, something that I've been doing for a long time because I'm a freak, but they're very interesting. They're these felted woven things that a man is creating, which is broken from the narrative of fiber arts being connected to a woman. So I thought that was interesting, but I really just seeing those belly button lint sitting on the sink doesn't make art, right? But you seeing it that way does. That's the power of that reframing. And I think there's so many artist examples of them being able to reframe in that way, and I needed those examples in order to see that possibility. It was critical for me.
Right, yeah. Sorry.
We've got another artist that
I think
Emily
we'll just
reached out to.
Sorry, I did reach out to Danielle, but I was hoping you'd be able to share it. But it's okay. Well, we gotta keep going. But Lisa Walcott, I teach with her at Hope. She's assistant professor of sculpture over there. Oh, did the image fall off? Okay, good. Yeah, so I reached out to her about that same question, and she mentioned time and focus, right? One of the biggest obstacles I consistently face as a parent and an artist is feeling that time is fragmented and my attention is divided. And then she just started to describe okay, well, I used to bring my kids into my studio a lot, and she actually, I remember going into her studio one time, she had created this little cubby for them to live in and have their own little world in her studio, and which was really cute. But then she mentioned that you can do that, right? But then your focus still is not, like, you're always on mom. Like, you're always, mom first, and then because you care about your child. So yeah, she said to combat my issues. Oh, and then she mentioned that she recently took a class at Oxbow where she was able to go and focus on a skill for like 9 hours a day.
And it was a 12-week intensive, so it was a lot of time.
Was it 12 weeks?
I thought
it was like 4,
weeks.
but whatever.
Okay.
It's an expensive class.
Yeah.
So anyway, but then she mentioned like, wow, like I didn't even know that I could do that right anymore. I was focused on one craft for that long, and it was really refreshing for her. So then she says, to combat my issues of time and focus, I often bring elements of my practice home with me. I work on weavings after bedtime, make drawings or collages about the sculptures that I want to make, which gives me a clearer starting point when I arrive to the studio, which I do something similar to. I keep a sketchbook and jot down ideas as they come, sketch and collect words, phrases from everyday life, which sometimes turn into titles. I also use my time at home to study other artists and read, so I'm informed and inspired in my practice. While I'll continue to show up regularly to work on my artwork, I also plan to carve out larger amounts of time to work consecutively, noting the focus I found in the intensive class as such a gift. And I think everybody works a little bit differently, but there is that like time and focus, right? It's probably one of the main obstacles that we're working against. And that requires resources that sometimes people don't have, right? So I think some of that is us kind of helping each other out. I use some of like similar strategies in my own practice. It's hard to say it's a practice, right? Because like I can only get like a couple hours a week, but I am so thankful for those couple hours a week. And once you're finally in, when you're in that phase of life and you're finally able to focus on your work, you never realize like how precious time is, and you have to make that time count. So then we get very good. I think parents get very good at doing the most amount of work in the least amount of time. Yeah. Right?
There's a woman an artist in the book that we're about to talk about that she's a painter, and she's talking about the time that she gets to spend in the studio, and she says, if I have 2 hours, then it's a 2-hour painting. If I have 10 hours, then it's a 10-hour painting. But not allowing that constraint to be a constraint. It's a positive thing. And I think artists, we always have constraints, right? We just have a little bit more constraints, which doesn't have to be a negative thing. It just really focuses you on what you're able to do with what you have. And that's not necessarily negative.
Right.
So many of us probably, if we attended art school, fell off of our practice a little bit afterwards because there was a lack of constraints.
Right, yeah.
So it is trying to find that balance between helpful and not helpful.
Right, and I think too, you have to be okay with your work changing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I've recently gotten back into figure drawing, and that requires a lot of time to make those. And so what I do, like I set up the time beforehand with like, I plan all those things actually with my children, and then I have a very focused time in the studio. However, it still takes a lot amount of time. And so one thing that I am still struggling with is there has to be another way that I'm materializing these ideas. It can't just be in this one process that takes forever. Like they're great. I'm going to keep doing them because they're very necessary and they're important for me to do. But I have to do it another way, and I think I just haven't fully linked that yet, but there has to be some other way that it's a little bit, something's materialized in a little bit of a quicker way, possibly with my children, right?
Yeah.
But, we can move on.
We'll try to...
We don't know this artist. We would love to meet her.
Yeah.
We don't, we're not getting any monetary, kickback from this. Has anybody read this book? Okay. It's not just for mothers, by the way.
Yeah. Dads will get something out of this book, too. But it's a must-read. This was a really, really critical turning point for both Emily and I. You had it first, because your husband gave this to you as a Mother's Day gift, right?
Yeah, last year.
Yeah.
Because it just came out last year. And he saw it, and he got it for me for Mother's Day, which normally he loves giving me books because he loves books.
Yes.
when I say that, you don't understand what I'm saying. Okay? My house is filled to the brim with books. Okay, but anyway, so then when he gives me books, I'm like, no, this is something you wanted. You thought I would like, tangentially. So it took me a while to crack it open. And by a while, I mean, like, actually, no, it took me like a day, because I read the first, like, couple pages, and I was like, all right.
I'm hooked.
It's one of those books that it was like, okay, this person wrote this for me, and I'm so glad that she carved out the time in her life to write it.
Yeah,
it was a
because
sacrifice.
she did this when she had 2 at that point, right? She wasn't
No,
just
she
pregnant.
was, like, she's writing it from the perspective, like, she wrote excerpts of it throughout the whole process of trying to get pregnant and then having her first, and then
by the end
she's pregnant with her second.
Yeah.
So yes, it is written from the point of view of a new mother, but it is
super helpful.
It's not just for that, but it is just so beautifully written too. And
she's a great writer, and just so honest about navigating the struggle that she's feeling as a writer and a parent. And she, in the beginning, she's working in the museum, and something that she talks about in I think the very first chapter is how she wanders the museum on her lunch break in search of other mothers, because she needs those examples to tell her to keep going, because she's at that turning point of like, could I just be satisfied being a mom? Do I need to keep creating? And as a writer, she's going to publishers and being denied all the time, and that's a part of being an artist too. But it was just like, do I keep going? And she ends up having enough conversations with artist mothers and telling their stories of success, of navigating these 2 things side by side, that it gives you like so much cathartic hope that I found really, really helpful. And I'm just so grateful that Emily recommended it to me.
I did. I stopped her. She was walking down the street with Wally, and I said, stop.
You did. You like ran. Like, you have to read this book. And it was a turning point, and I'm so grateful for it, because I needed to hear that my voice was necessary still. Right, yeah. And that was the main takeaway, I think, for both of us, was just to feel necessary.
Yeah. I love what she says. Like, the last 2 pages of the book are like,
yeah.
Just basically saying, like, why it's not just like that, like, it's that your voice is so necessary, like you said. It's like the experience of parenting is so vital to
our communities,
all like the existence of the human life, right? And it's part of the human condition. And if we're artists and we're probably making work about the human condition in some way, and like, and that's such a vital part of that of what we're making work about. And so it's I mean, do I have time to read this?
At least the last quote.
Whether an artist comes back to her art practice 3 weeks or 30 years after her child is born, her audience is better for her departure and for her return. I do want to read this though, okay? Let me do it. Why persevere in making art? Because our communities need art made by those who can't take their eyes off of the vulnerable ones of this world. We need a visual culture, a literary culture, a culture of performance that wakes us up to the dignity of every person. Each chapter in this book details one or more virtues that, at her best, a mother brings to the creative life, gifts that she gives her audience. An artist who's been transfigured in pregnancy gives us the body in all its strange beauty. An artist who has lost a child refuses to explain away tragedy and companions all who grieve. An artist who's been through the calamity of childbirth shows us women's vulnerability and strength. We need artists who have tamed their egos enough to take time for others, then revive their ambitions to be generous with their talents. Anyway, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, the whole book is so good.
So, I mean,
and it's
that
an audiobook too, so you can listen to this. You don't have to have the time to read.
Which brings us to this question of, like, again, so you don't have to read the book, but I highly suggest it. And so, like, the experience of reading it, and then maybe you have your own experiences of things that maybe you've read, right? And I'd love to hear about those, of like how it kind of shifted your mind. And for me with this book, it was that it gave me permission to create. It gave me permission to create from this mindset, because I had, been inundated, and we all have been inundated with the narrative that mother can't be artist can't be mother, and we also don't want to hear anything you have to say about it either, because it's not, right? Because it's not, it might be something that I can't necessarily relate to because I'm not one. And I think that might come from like some envy or something, you know. Maybe there's people that actually is troublesome for, and maybe that is painful for them to look at and see. But it is a vital human experience. And one thing that, and I'll just share, when my husband gave me this book, I was in some pretty dark postpartum depression that took me completely off guard. I had absolutely no idea that was ever going to happen. It just kind of swept me out from under my feet, and I was in a very dark place. And if it wasn't for him and my mom, like, my kids would not have been in a good place. So when I was reading this book, like, I don't know if I can describe to you, like, I honestly forgot I was an artist, okay? Like, does that make sense? Like, that's how, I'm not saying that because I want to bring light to the darkness of motherhood. The reason, because it's a beautiful, beautiful experience, and it's absolutely amazing. But that is a very real experience. Yeah. That not only that I never think was ever going to happen to me, but I had no framework for it. I had never really read much about it or seen much artwork about that. So it wasn't really communicated to me very well, or maybe I didn't have the ears to listen or the eyes to see this real experience. So when I was reading this book, it just awakened that inside of me, of that I have permission to be an artist while I'm a mother, and not only do I have that, but the world needs to hear what I have to say, and the art world needs to make space for it. Yep. And needs to take the time to listen. So that's where, like, it just
felt like a call to action.
It did.
Yeah.
It just felt like, oh gosh, like, not only can I do this, but I need to do this. Yeah. And so it really did kind of spark, like, this whole new body of work for me that I'm hoping, like, will shift and change as I, grow, older too. But yeah, and so then that's when I arrested her on the sidewalk.
And that's really what, like, that was, like, the seed of our relationship, was, like, sharing that book together. And, like, I binged that book because I was listening to it on drives to Detroit for work. And so it was, like, I got through it very quickly. And it was just, like, we need each other. Like, we have each other across the street. Like, this is amazing. And we need to figure out how we move forward together. How we support each other, how we create accountability together, and just taking this and finding those strategies to really, like, take the inspiration that we both found and make something actionable out of it. And that's the next part of this, is just simple strategies. And luckily, you found the artist residency in motherhood, and it was shortly after reading the book that you shared that with me. You said, I'm going to do this. And so for those of you who don't know, this residency is self-directed. It takes place in your home, and it's just reframing parenthood as a site for creativity. This is something that, how do you, Lincoln Clayton, yeah.
Do you know her, Danielle? Do you know her?
Oh my gosh.
Are you serious?
Hero. She's a hero. Because she created this, and maybe you can speak to it better than I can, but I think it was like a year and a half after she'd had her son, and she needed to create some goals, some deadlines, and some real accountability for herself, because she didn't have the ability to leave for 2 weeks at a time to go to a residency anymore. She was 15 years into her career, and there weren't places for her now. So how am I going to keep going? And so she created this for herself, and she created a website, so it was very public, right? And I think for me, making a goal is one thing, having a deadline, making it a public deadline is a completely other thing. I need that aspect of it. And
you mean like an exhibition or like a residency?
Exactly. Or like people just I need the accountability built into the deadline in some way. Like they have to be very connected. And I think she probably did too, because, she made like business cards for herself that made this residency very real and tangible. She made vinyl for the windows that said she was an artist in residency, and she took it very seriously. She did that for 3 years, and that's how she maintained her creative practice. We showed a picture at the very beginning. We said naming the problem, where it's just a collection of all the things that she pulled out of her son's mouth. Right? So it was a valuable site for her creative practice now. It was connected, it was generative, and that piece now lives in a permanent collection in a museum in Arkansas. So other people have found value in that, right? This isn't just us. And we also need each other to make those things. Like, it's valuable for everyone that's not a mother or a parent, but it's valuable for the people in this room to see our voices represented for each other. But I think, if you haven't heard about the residency, go to the website. It's on the resources page, and it's got just a great way to really frame your goals and deadlines and some accountability for yourself. Because I think those 3 things is how you take that inspiration and put it into action.
And even just filling out the form is really like...
Exactly.
Like, it kind of awakens of like, oh yeah, okay, this is the structure I need, right? Was there anything else? So create accountability, setting an actionable deadline. Because then this goes into our...
Yeah, we're running out of time here, so...
Running out of time here. What does this say?
Do you want to ask that? Yeah. Do you guys have any strategies that you've tried that have worked or haven't worked for you? Is there another resource you want to point out?
Yeah, we haven't gone over our resources stuff, but yeah. Danielle she's a walking Zagat guide for all these things.
There's so many, places to find support, and I would have been completely lost in my journey in parenthood as an artist if I had not previously found people who were also parents and artists. And one of my best friends, who's actually on her way into town tonight,
Courtney, okay, great.
A dear friend of mine, Courtney Kessel, has been really a supporter for that. She started in grad school with a 3-year-old, and her whole body of work was about that balance.
Yeah.
And so I think finding other people who can be supportive, finding that network. Lincoln Clayton is definitely an artist residency in motherhood is a fabulous source. There's, I think it's now called the Caregivers Network that Caleb Goodwin, I think, is doing in Portland. How do you say the name?
I think it's Newton.
I always add an L. I think I make it like a chemical.
It's a few artists on the podcast.
Yeah.
That's a really great resource. And then, prior, of course, we always have to look at, Mary Kelly postpartum document.
Right,
Kind of, take a nod to our feminist artist mothers who are really trying to get this work out there in the 70s.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Here, we'll just kind of move over here.
Yeah, and that really does lead us right into the community that we all need together. And when I had finished renovating my 2-stall garage into the studio or gallery space, I knew that I wanted to have rotating pop-up exhibitions in there, but after completing it, Emily and I were talking, and I realized what I'm really after is community. This needs to be a site of creating community. And so we've been brainstorming how we create those things, and we've come up with a critique group that'll be virtual, and that'll happen every second Friday after bedtime, hopefully, so 8:15. And I think that's just a regular thing that now we can find some support in, right, with people that are potentially experiencing very similar constraints as you. And that was something that you were really passionate about, creating this free...
Crit group. Yeah, that was no barriers or anything.
Right.
So I do have a lot of other artist mother friends that might not even be in the area either too, but they also need that accountability as well. So we haven't started it yet. The first one would be...
on the 14th.
On the 14th, yeah. But it's on the page.
Yes, it's on
On
your
the-
calendar there. Cut it out, put it on your fridge.
So the first one's there, and then we'll just see how it goes. But I know that I know of several artists that are really hungry for that and are planning on being involved. So we'll create framework around that as it grows.
Yeah.
And so then we have an idea for an artist cohort where people can join and are a little bit more serious about creating like bodies of work, right? So and then allowing for a solo exhibition once a year, and then
A group exhibition as well.
curated group
Yeah.
exhibition.
I think that just takes it a step further, right? For people that are like me that need like a more public deadline and some very serious accountability. I think that is just a program that's a year long that can really help you get into that, right? And have these people that are also parents supporting you in that. We'll have monthly meetings, you'll have an accountability partner, and like Emily said, those exhibitions to really focus on creating work around. So I'm excited about it. It's free to apply. There is a fee associated with the program because we need to cover just the physical costs of having shows, right? So like food,
Yeah.
beverages, touch-up paint for the walls, and hopefully moving forward, I mean, after a year of proof of concept, we would love to start being able to apply for grants. So this is something that is self-funded. But for right now, we need your help.
We'll figure it out as we go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like maybe we'll probably do like Kickstarter
Yeah.
stuff and see where it goes. But-
Right.
So anyway, but that's Hammerspace, and the birth of like the community that we're trying to do. No pun intended.
Yeah.
So this is the creating a gallery in the garage.
Yep.
This is really cool. So I actually have something similar but different to my
Okay.
entire backyard. Is
Yeah.
it stands for a last one big, but my wife allowed me to do this. Right, essentially just put panels, 4x8 sheets, panels of wood on the entire backyard.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
And I have an artist from Brazil who's in town for our vibes, who knows that you never come out with a piece in my backyard. So
That's great.
Yeah.
This graffiti gallery.
Right.
The idea is like, man, how do I get people back here?
Mhm.
Just like walk through it without it being weird, you know?
I know, yeah, exactly, right?
Well, garage spaces and independent spaces are definitely like, it's not a new concept, right? But I think we definitely need it here in West Michigan. Michelle had one for a little while. She's closed it. And then the other one I know of is in Holland,
Yeah.
and she's closing that to be more of like it was called The Garage, and he's closing that to be more of like a studio
Yeah. We've got a different
educational
space
space. But
those
and, yeah,
DIY
there's, like, these
spaces are
DIY
so needed. I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about it just in the panel, right? That
But
we
we're-
need to get scrappy and make things that don't exist for us.
exactly, which is what this is.
Yeah.
This is what this is for us. Is like, I know there are other parent artists out there dealing with these things, and we need to
Yeah.
come around each other. And then as far as like the garage space, I will say like we're taking it to like a level of excellence too, though. Like, so I have experience in gallery preparator and some gallery management stuff, and then she's got her curator experience. So we're bringing that together. Well, the space is finished, and so we're gonna hang professionally.
Just paint a gallery, and I think like one of the most frustrating things is telling somebody that you are a primary caregiver and an artist, and then all of a sudden like you're not actually working.
Right.
Like so they look at you like you're not actually trying to make things professionally. It's just like this fun little, and that's not a bad thing to have a fun thing.
Right. No, we're taking this very seriously. We're both perfectionists. We both worked in large arts organizations.
Yeah, you came from.
I
What was
worked
it called in
Portland, Oregon. Disjecta was a big contemporary art center. It's now the Oregon Center for Contemporary Art, and that's where I learned how to be a gallery and worked. It was an internship that turned into a position there. I fell in love with nonprofit, and that specific gallery was really focused on installation art, and they had a curator in residence program. It was great for that city. I mean, there's so many galleries in Portland, but that was one of the few nonprofits that was really focused on giving people the opportunities that they needed. And so, yeah, I think we both have those experiences where like we've seen it at this level, and so now we have to replicate that. And
In
these are the
this garage.
constraints.
we'll see. We'll see, what happens.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about it. And
Yeah, I think it'll be
yeah.
really good. And I'm excited to let's make a map, right? Like if there are other
Yeah,
people
yeah.
that are trying to start these
That'd be
things,
amazing.
Because I just learned out about the one in Holland. Like that was new to me until I had started posting things on Hammerspace's Instagram, and they reached out saying, "Hey, another artist-run space. Let's support each other." But I think we need to make everyone aware that these exist, right? I mean, it is awkward to try to come on to my backyard. But let's bring some legitimacy to that as an avenue for people, and inspire other people to do the same thing. That if the space doesn't exist for you, let's figure out ways to create it.
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah.
Everybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to the obstacles question, so I think of all our mothers, father, I was different. My brain was slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woman's brain, my wife has proved that. My biggest obstacle is my wife is an entrepreneur and a endurance athlete.
Okay.
She's very, very, very busy. She's very
Yeah.
independent. And
Driven.
She,
Yeah.
the house could be on fire and throwing things, and she could be throwing fire and on her computers. And so it's so because we're both busy, she's very driven person. I end up doing a lot of the housework and things like that. I can't do anything when the house looks crazy.
Yeah, I'm that way too.
Right.
Right. Nope.
Everything's gone. Until it's to the point where it's ordered.
Mm-hmm.
And then by that time, the order comes, and now I'm too tired.
Right, yeah.
Another day wasted,
Well, I'd like to combat that a little bit because it's one of the things that I feel as well. I also need a very, it's just how I cope. I need it. I know that there's chaos in my life, but if I can control my surroundings, then at least there's that. And so, yeah, I need things to be in order before I feel like I have the ability to step into the studio or make something or enter into a physical making process. And recently it's been reframing energy, that me creating is not expending energy. That even if I'm tired, what I'm about to do is gain energy, not spend the energy. Because it is generative, that it gives me energy to go back into my domestic life with, right? It's not that I'm just spending this time. It's that I'm gaining something for myself. I'm giving myself fuel by pushing through the tiredness. Just give yourself 10 minutes, right? If all I have to do is 10 minutes, and then if I'm really too tired, I can stop. But most likely, you're going to keep going.
There is a part. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah.
It's the idea of your life becomes your art.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I have a 6-year-old daughter, and last summer we started making videos together. She helps direct them and holds my phone. That is all I got.
I love it.
And we started watching stuff together and making videos on the house chores. And suddenly the chores became more fun. We wanted to do them. And then it's also teaching her life skills. We love our house, so we care for our house. So
Yeah.
we do it. But it's kind of what
Right.
you're saying. And also I go in and my head explodes because it's so messy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the art is
Yeah, no, it is part of it.
life
Yeah.
is the art.
Right.
I think a very common thing, I'm 100% agreement with all of these experiences, but the other thing that so many artists encounter is even if you don't have kids and you have a house and it's a messy space or whatever, that it can be hard to focus on that in your home, and that often other lines of work or other hobbies or things take you out of your house.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are a creator that needs the things at your house, or your studio is in your home, you don't have that option. And so I'm trying to work on how do I choose to ignore this thing over here so I can go in this room and make some stuff or whatever, or can I take a small thing with me somewhere else out of my house, so that I can you know,
Separate.
I don't have the option to clean something. I have to,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
and so it's difficult, but I'm not sure what other ways to, like,
Well, I
work
think
with
it
that.
speaks to like a real problem that and this is a completely different thing that I wish was addressed in the panel, that there are not studio spaces in this city.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge barrier for artists that are
Yeah.
trying to maintain a practice.
Right.
If you don't have a space in your house, Samantha is dealing with that right now. She paints in her dining room with a 2-year-old running around her, almost 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's impossible in some ways. And she's finding ways to work within those constraints. But like you said, being able to leave the house, I know in the past, before I even had children, was really critical for me to make work. I will find any distraction for myself. Like, it's an avoidance measure, right? Like, I don't know if I'm going to be successful in today's, time that I give myself. There's a fear aspect, I think, a vulnerability aspect that comes along with that. I think we do seek out some of this housework that could be put off as avoidance measures of dealing with, like, okay, I don't know if what I'm going to do today is going to be any good. So let me find something to distract myself with. I know that's true for myself. So having space outside of the house is really important. I don't know how we solve that problem. I think there really needs to be a look at how we create spaces for artists to work in outside of their house in this city.
Yeah. It's big.
It's huge. It's huge. And I mean, you talked about how they used to kind of exist, right?
Well, I think they're still there, aren't they, on Bridge Street or something, or no? Then the warehouse where, like, nobody... And then where does Nick's painting studio?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that space though. I think that still has, our studio spaces.
Yeah, if you could let me know.
Well, they're not cheap. They're huge, and they're not HVAC.
But
They're
it was
right
interesting
or
when
something.
the first slide was reframing turn struggles and obstacles, because I literally have baby gates
Yeah.
that around me, like I'm creating obstacles. And my son just wants to paint on my stuff, but that's inspired like this new journey that I'm going where I'm doing collaboration with my 2-year-old and my like big finished painting. So it's like turning something that was this obstacle, but it's kind of created this new idea. But also I really do need a place to work where I'm not like listening to Cocomelon like on repeat in the other room. So
Right, yeah. We gotta
Yeah. I think
brainstorm
if
it.
anyone knows who has a place, let me know.
Yeah.
The other half of my basement.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for...
Thank you. Appreciate you
Oh,
guys.
yeah. Shameless plug, like, I'll be doing a show at Hammerspace.
Yeah, please come.
March
Love to see you
29th.
guys.
And then I'll be doing a virtual artist talk in partnership with Maternal Resources in Grand Rapids to bring awareness to postpartum depression. And that'll be on March 27th, late at night.
After bedtime.
But all that's on there. Thank you guys so much.